Well, good morning, everyone, and Happy New Year to everyone. 2023 is going to be an amazing year, and we are here today starting off with CCI, and we're very excited to be here once again with everyone. This subcommittee focuses on our city's efforts around sustainability and recycling our neighborhoods, parks, arts, libraries, education, and Head Start and homelessness. I would like to call this meeting to order. Today's date is January 4th, 2023, and the time is 10:03 a.m. And we will start today's meeting with call to the public. First, I would like to have a representative from the Law Department read a brief statement on the public comment section of this meeting.
Good morning, Madam Chair. During citizen comment, members of the public may address the subcommittee for up to 3 minutes on issues of interest or concern to them. The Arizona Open Meeting Law permits the subcommittee members to listen to the comments, but prohibits members from discussing or acting on the matters presented. Thank you, Madam Chair.
Thank you. Now we will turn to staff for any public comment. Do we have anyone on the line?
We do not have anyone on the line for public comment.
Thank you. Next, we will move to approve the minutes of our December meeting. Is there a motion to approve the minutes from December 7, 2022?
I move to approve.
Second.
All in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Anyone opposed?
Aye.
Passes unanimously. Thank you so much for that. Now we will move to the consent items on our agenda. Items 2 and 3. These items are the artist purchase agreements for Phoenix Sky Harbor Present for Art Collection Project. And number 3, the artist design and construction contract for Solano Park Public Art Project. Is there a motion on items 2 and 3?
I'll move to approve.
Second.
All those in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Motion passes. Next on the agenda, we have items 4 through 6 for information only. These items are the Head Start Birth to 5 monthly report, November 2022, the Portland Lou pilot program, neighborhood tree and shade pilot program update. Would any of my colleagues like to hear more information on these items?
I would like to hear more on 5 and 6, if possible.
Perfect. So we will start with item 5. The Portland Lou.
Madam
pilot.
Chair,
Yes.
members of the subcommittee, I have staff coming forward to talk about the Portland Lou pilot program. Gina Montez, the Deputy City Manager, and individuals from the division, the homeless division, as well as Parks and Recreation. And the Chief Innovation Officer.
Good morning, Chairwoman, members of the subcommittee. We're here before you this morning. We had provided an information report, providing you an update on where we are since last month's meeting in terms of potential options for the Portland Lou. Due to the holidays, we're still working on identifying additional locations. We did identify one potential location at University Park for an additional Portland Lou. We still have the one planned for the new shelter on 22nd Street and Lower Buckeye, and that one will use funding in the current project to test out one of those Lou's. We are also trying to identify funding for any potential Lou's, and that's kind of part of the holdup for us, is that we don't have any capital dollars associated with that. We have done some additional research in terms of the hard costs of providing that. I think the Lou's are approximately $130,000 themselves. However, the infrastructure costs for installation really will depend on the location. Will depend where the utilities are in relationship to the Lou. So could be $50,000. It could be more, just depending on where the location might be. We also did some research on doing a brick and mortar type option And I believe Parks and Rachel also have some information on specifically roughly what that might cost by comparison. So which would be, I think, 2 or 3 restrooms. So I'll let them talk a little bit more about that. But just to kind of summarize where we are is we have one additional potential location in addition to the one we previously proposed. We're identifying, looking to see if there are other options in the city, and also for funding. But at this time, we don't have the funding identified for additional ones other than the initial one. But I'll turn it over to Rachel, I guess.
Thank you, Madam Chair and Subcommittee. So as Ms. Montez said, a base model of a Portland Loo is roughly $130,000. With some of the bells and whistles that we'd like to add, it can get up to $149,000. And then based on our estimates from the city engineer, it's roughly $40,000 to $50,000, but it depends again on the site that you find for the location. We're excited to have the one at the shelter at 3000 South 22nd Street because that will give us an opportunity to see how the loo stands up to the summer heat, to the usage that we will have at that location, with roughly 280 people living at that location and having the ability to use that loo. We also compared it with some standalone Parks restrooms and got some quotes there. Hard to measure. A Portland Loo is just one single restroom, and we don't typically build just one single restroom in the park situation, but I'll let Director of Parks talk about the pricing there.
Sure. Good morning, Madam Chair, members of the subcommittee. In terms of building a standalone restroom on a park property, there's also a lot of variables there, but I can say in today's world where we are with construction estimates, we're looking at $400,000 to $500,000 to build a two-stall restroom on an existing park property.
Thank you so much for the update. So just to clarify, so $400,000 to $500,000 would be the cost for us to do a typical brick and mortar restroom for 2 stalls. The Portland Loo is obviously around $150,000, maybe an additional $150K or $50K for infrastructure. The main comment I had here, I mean, the reason I strongly believe in this model, and I know you all are not the representatives of the Portland Loo, but I know you have spoken to them. Can you, by chance, Rachel or Gina, speak to some of the benefits of the specific model around, like, for example, many concerns that we hear from parents, let's say, is that people use those classic brick and mortar restrooms to do drugs. That's hard to, sometimes something happens to one stall, so the entire bathroom becomes unusable. Some of those top 3, top 5 common issues that we see with a regular bathroom, what are some of the differences with the technology that the Portland Loo uses that would help alleviate those issues?
Thank you, Madam Chair, members of the subcommittee. So one of the models that we like specifically for the people experiencing homelessness, putting it in areas where there's lots of folks that are around in walkable areas, is the see-through top and bottom, so you can really see how many people are in there, and have a security aspect there, as well as the non-destructible. I believe it's a graffiti-free proof coating on the Portland Loos, which we tend to like. One of the drawbacks is that it really is only one stall. It's a relatively expensive model for the one stall, but we're excited to see how it goes at our shelter on 22nd Avenue.
And I understand there's also technology within the bathroom with a specific kind of lighting that makes it difficult to use needles or do any sort of drugs.
I can't speak to that. I do know that the lighting is more security proof, would not be as easy to sort of break, but I can't speak specifically to the drugs.
Okay.
Madam Chair, Councilwoman Ansari, I will just to note that the Portland Loo was designed in conjunction with the City of Portland, with specifically the issues that the service providers and the city had in terms of people experiencing homelessness and kind of things being out in the public with not constant monitoring of the loos. And so I do understand what you're referring to does relate to those issues of not good things happening in them, and the grates on the top and the bottom, and the lighting, and the kind of indestructibility of them. And as you mentioned, I believe they are plumbed separately so that we've had situations with the portable units that have multiple stalls in them, that if one gets stopped up, the whole unit goes down. And so you are correct that is something that's different about how the Portland Loos are designed.
Yeah, and I think we need to be innovative with these issues, which is why the typical stuff isn't working. I mean, Gina, it's like once a week I get texts and emails about how those water faucets or the bathrooms by the Human Services campus that are very classic, like beautiful bathrooms, but they don't have this kind of advanced technology where they were designed to address these issues. And so I kind of want to move away from those classic models, which, as Cynthia mentioned, are actually quite expensive. They're not necessarily cheaper, and move towards something more innovative. And I guess, and I know we're still working it through, I would like to see us pilot them not only at the shelter, just because that is a very enclosed location. It's not like what these bathrooms are particularly designed for, like they're designed to be in the public. And so I think, as opposed to losing another year during the summer heat, let's pilot one in a park where we do constantly have people reaching out about why do we have limited bathroom access only from 4 to 8 inside a recreation center. It's very challenging to actually use the bathroom currently at University Park. It can be anywhere, but I think it's important to try it out in a shelter, but also somewhere in the public where it's meant to be used. So hopefully in the next update we can see a proposal that looks at two. Thank you.
Thank you. Any other questions or comments? Great. Well, thank you guys so much for that update. And now we will move to Neighborhood Tree and Shade Pilot Program update.
Madam Chair, members of the subcommittee, David Handula will provide an update and answer any questions.
Thank you, Madam Chair and subcommittee members. Happy New Year. Good to be here. Just to provide a few comments, then I'll be happy to answer your questions and have discussion. As outlined in the report, we certainly, in the Office of Heat Response and Mitigation, see a need to expand the portfolio of city-led and city-driven tree planting initiatives, moving beyond where the bulk of our investments have been along the major arterials and in parks into neighborhoods where we've heard for decades people asking for more trees. And with your support, significant funding has become available to do just that, whether we're talking about the American Rescue Plan, second tranche of funding, whether we're talking about the GO bond or other sources from external partners. We are really well positioned to expand the portfolio of city-driven tree planting activities. As the report suggests, we've been working over the past several months with partners to understand how to do that in a way that will be successful and sustainable over the long term. We've heard time and time again in community dialogue, this is certainly much more than just dropping a tree off in somebody's front yard. To have that tree grow and achieve the increases in canopy that we're looking for requires comprehensive thinking. We've been working with some of our partners in the community, tree nonprofits in particular, to understand what a comprehensive scope of work and appropriate schedule would look like. We've been working with our procurement team to understand how to move money out the door to have those partners execute these projects. And I know it's important for this subcommittee in particular that we are engaged with and listening to the community. And I'll remind the subcommittee members that we're in a really fortunate position to already have a recipe and guidance from the community how to do neighborhood tree planting projects from the Nature Conservancy facilitated heat action planning process in South Phoenix and Edison Eastlake a number of years ago. We're trying to lean heavily on the wisdom that's in that plan. So we're looking forward to getting some of these concrete pieces lined up in the very near future and seeing plants go in the ground soon. Thank you.
Thank you. Any questions? Councilwoman Ansari.
Thank you, Dr. Handula. Just a couple of questions. Thank you so much for the program update. Definitely excited for this program and how it will help us improve some of the areas where we have low tree equity scores and improve our air quality throughout the city. Something that I didn't hear in the update, and I know you just kind of flew through it, was how we're planning to support residents in low-income neighborhoods with their once we help them plant trees on their properties, what happens after that? Could you walk us through that process if you have it?
Absolutely. We're certainly still learning what the total package will look like in conversation with partners and community members. But as we outlined in the ARPA conversation, our current plan is that the biggest piece of the investment will be in people and not plant material, training and hiring neighborhood tree stewards, or another name yet to be determined, that'll be the champions of this initiative with neighbors, trusted ambassadors in the community who understand what the appropriate watering schedules are, what any maintenance needs might look like, if there are any red flags where we might need to bring in more professional help. So we'd like to be paying residents to do that, and also thinking about the entire suite of complementary services, whether we're talking about irrigation lines, whether we're talking about extra material that the trees might need to grow. We want to have a pool of resource available. We do have a pool of resource available to do that, as well as removing existing dead tree matter in people's yards that we've heard is a real barrier to increasing tree canopy in some of these neighborhoods. The entire program is meant to focus on underserved and low tree equity score areas. So if we're not thinking about how to make this succeed in low-income areas, we're way off the mark.
Thank you for that. Related to that, I know we focus on trees that are low water users, but these trees still may need extra water for the first few years while they are fully established. Do you have a program in mind to help families with any additional costs they may face from increased water bills or just any unintended costs they may face from participating in our tree program?
Yeah, we're certainly mindful, and thank you, Councilwoman Ansari and Madam Chair, for the question. Certainly mindful about not creating unintended consequences, whether it's a cost or concern about the cost of water, whether it's about potential damage from a tree to somebody's property. Some of the tree nonprofits have some ideas about insurance-like ideas that can help provide some protection there. We do think that education is a really important part, speaking of water in particular. While I don't want to suggest that a nominal amount of water may not be a burden for some communities, we have a sense that at least some education will be helpful to inform residents that the actual amount of water that is needed is not particularly significant. We think that the perceived cost of water may be more of a barrier than the actual cost for some residents, not all. And where the real cost of water is a barrier, we're certainly in conversation with colleagues to see how we might be able to offset those costs.
Okay, got it. That's great to hear. Additionally, neighborhood tree maintenance is, of course, a concern. Our streets department maintains trees and landscaping on arterial roads, and you may know that's going to be happening monthly rather than quarterly now, which is great. Will there be any support for maintaining the trees we plant on private property, or do we rely on that training and education that you mentioned?
Thank you, Councilwoman, Madam Chair. Our hope is, in talking to some of the tree nonprofits, their scope of work would include either maintenance or maintenance advising for a period of a year, 2 years, 3 years after the tree has gone in the ground. And then if our tree ambassador, tree steward program is successful, residents and their neighbors will be equipped with the information to help those trees continue to grow in a healthy manner moving forward.
Great. Once again, I just want to say I'm wholeheartedly in support of this program. I want to see it grow and implemented as soon as possible. It's very exciting. I understand Q1 of this year we will be able to start seeing more detailed updates of where you will be implementing, but I also do just want to make sure that we do it right. So I appreciate that you are thinking through those unintended consequences and making sure that the people we are investing in have the training to be able to maintain this moving forward without facing any additional burdens. But thanks so much for the work you're doing.
Thank you, Councilwoman and Madam Chair.
Thank you, Chairwoman.
Thank you. Thank you so much for that update. And now we will move to items 7 or 9.
Chairwoman?
Oh, I'm sorry. Councilmember Garcia?
Thank you so much. I have a couple questions for David.
Okay, go for it.
Thank you. First of all, I really appreciate thinking through low-income neighborhoods and figuring out what watering all that looks like. So please keep us updated. We can help in any way around that. The main question I had is, how are you selecting, or how are we looking at areas of need or where we're going to invest in?
Thank you, Councilman Garcia, Madam Chair. It's an excellent question, and we're really fortunate to have many, many resources available to help with the process for identifying priority neighborhoods including resources from our partners at American Forests and a study completed just for this project earlier last year by scholars with the NASA Develop program. I'd be happy to send you a copy of their report, Councilman Garcia. We're trying to take all of the factors that the community, including our Urban Heat Island Tree Shade Subcommittee, have told us are important to think about when prioritizing neighborhoods, then select the data resources that are most closely aligned with those variables, those factors that people say are important for us to think about, put them into some sort of calculation, some sort of algorithm that gives different neighborhoods around the city a score, identify the highest score neighborhoods, and then talk to people in those neighborhoods to figure out if indeed this type of program will make sense there. For this particular initiative that Councilwoman Ansari is speaking about, getting trees into people's front yards, an important, and backyards, an important variable that is not typically taken into account in a generic tree prioritization process is where there is vacant land on residential properties and neighborhoods. And that was an important factor for this NASA team that helped give us a head start in identifying particular neighborhoods. We'd of course welcome your input and that from all of Council. Councilman Garcia.
Thank you so much. I appreciate it. I know the county and others have used zip codes to determine that, and I know sometimes, zip codes can go from an area that has a lot of need to an area that doesn't have a need, and I think the same can happen, especially with some of our neighborhoods in Central City South, that if we consider a neighborhood, the northern part of the neighborhood might be okay, but a piece of it might not be okay. So appreciate the fact that we're looking into different variables and not kind of clustering spaces together, because I think that's how we've been left with some unintended islands where we don't have that canopy. So again, thank you for the work. Appreciate the work that you all are doing, and let us know if we can support it in any other way.
Thank you, Councilman Garcia. And Madam Chair, if I may just add for the record, Councilman Garcia, we're in a fortunate position that all of the tools we're working with are at either the census tract or the census block group level, much finer spatial areas than zip codes. I share your skepticism of zip codes as a useful spatial unit for this particular type of program. Thank you.
Thank you. Appreciate it.
Any other questions? Any other comments?
Madam Chair, we do have one person virtually that would like to make comments.
Oh, perfect.
We have one speaker for this item joining us virtually, Dan Penton. Dan, are you on the line? You may proceed.
Yes, good morning. Thank you, Madam Chair and members of the subcommittee. Thank you for the presentation on neighborhood trees, and I have a couple of questions and concerns actually. Councilwoman Ansari mentioned tree maintenance and on private property, and how the city is responsible for maintaining trees in the public right of way and in city properties and stuff like that. In April, there was a tree planting done as part of the Cool Corridors program at Cesar Chavez Park. And while that was a great investment in the community, and it in the long term will be great. There's concerns with the number of trees that have died in a relatively short period of time. At one point there was counted like close to 24, and that was reported to the city via My Phoenix 311. And nothing was ever done about it. And there was questions raised about how close they were together. And, so when you're talking about maintenance, when the tree, also there's, issues along Broadway Road on 19th Ave. Anywhere there seems to be trees are planted, there seems to be deficiencies in how they're maintained. And a lot of them seem to die and without being replaced. So that's one concern. And how does the city plan, or what are the proposals out there to kind of address that, to mitigate those effects? Secondly, when we're talking about trees on private property, my community in Levine in particular, we recently had the HOA go through and they removed about 70 trees from the common areas, and that directly affected several of our residents. And and they're experiencing increased heating and cooling costs, and have requested those to be replaced. Is there a way that residents can, get those issues addressed by the city? And I think I hit my time limit already. I apologize. Um, but so I'll just leave it at that. But those are the few of the concerns that I have. But overall, I'm supportive of the programs going forward, and like to see these um, be beneficial to the community. Thank you.
Thank you. David, are you able to answer some of those questions?
Madam Chair, I can certainly take a shot at it. Thank you to our caller for your comments and concerns. And we share your concern that our success rate in planting trees in the streetscape is not 100%. All across the country, cities are hostile environments for tree planting. We are trying to learn lessons from other arid cities as well as cities in rainier locations about how to increase that survival rate to be as close to 100% as possible. As Councilwoman Ansari alluded to a few moments ago, the city is making a new investment to have more regular eyes on trees in the streetscape. With our current inspection schedule and visit schedule, too many opportunities creep in for trees to die or really move into an unhealthy status before we are able to become aware of it. So I think this increased visitation schedule will really help our streetscape areas have more trees. We're also looking into opportunities to add more training opportunities for city employees and our contractors who are involved in tree planting. Many of the tree planting initiatives that are led by the city have professional arborists in the process already. There is a lot of knowledge in this process that I don't think we've done as good of a job celebrating as we could moving forward, highlighting where our real tree expertise is. But we also know there's a lot of need to add more expertise in the community, and we've had several conversations thinking about ways to do that, particularly for the third-party contractors who we're relying on. With respect to trees on private property and the HOAs, I hope our caller will be encouraged to hear that the Regional Urban Forestry Roundtable has a subcommittee that's specifically focused on HOA engagement. I don't sit on that subcommittee myself. My colleague Laura Martins, our Urban Tree Program Manager, does. But we recognize how influential and how important HOAs are in this conversation. And I know there's a lot of engagement happening and planned with that subcommittee. Thank you to the caller and Madam Chair for the questions.
Thank you. Any other follow-up on this item? Councilwoman Ansari?
Sorry, just to get a little bit better understanding. So for the cool corridor, for example, that was referred to, and all other cool corridors that we will be planting, are we relying on those monthly street, cleanings to handle that? Or does someone from your office or is there some sort of follow through to make sure, okay, every 6 months we're going to go check if there's a dead tree, we will replace it, or how does that all work?
Yeah, thank you, Councilwoman Ansari, Madam Chair. It's a good question, and to be frank, we have not thought about the role that our team should have in this process. It's an interesting idea you bring forward that perhaps we could complement what Streets is already doing in terms of tree inspection. During the summer months, a very high visitation schedule will be required. If a dripper fails, for example, and a tree is missing water, a young tree in particular, for a week or 2 or 3, that can be a fatal scenario for that particular tree. So we do need a lot of eyes out there. We will certainly take that to our colleagues in Streets and see how we might be able to work together on that. And as the caller noted, the community's eyes are really helpful here as well. Using Phoenix 311, we do receive a weekly report of all of the heat-related concerns that come into 311. I'll have to look and investigate the caller's concern in particular, but we don't want to be exclusively relying on the community to have a good visitation schedule, but the community can see a lot more than we can every day, and we want to be sure that being able to communicate with us is known widely.
Got it. Okay, well, thank you again. That's helpful. I think just making sure we do these cool corridors right and that we, do have regular eyes on them ourselves, I think is super important to be able to make the case of why they're so critical, and we should continue investing in them across our city. So thank you for your commitment to that.
And Madam Chair and Councilwoman Ansari, it also occurs to me that our Streets Department has been exploring the use of higher tech options for irrigation system, smart cloud-connected controllers that can help give us eyes on the ground from here in City Hall that we don't have available throughout the city right now. I can envision a future in which we don't have to be seeing drippers fail in the street and can be doing so from our desktop, but we're just not there yet, and we don't yet have the full budget resources to do that everywhere, but we might be bringing some ideas to you about that forward in the future.
Great, thank you.
Great, thank you. Other questions, other comments? Okay, great. We will now move, thank you so much for that, David. We will now move on to items 7 through 9, which are for information and discussion. We will start with item 7, which is an air quality update on ozone. And we will begin the presentation from the Office of Environmental Programs. And I believe we have a caller for this as well, right?
Madam Chair, that is correct.
Okay, perfect.
Madam Chair and members of the subcommittee, I'm Nancy Allen with the Office of Environmental Programs, and I've got Tim Franquist with me, Environmental Director for the Maricopa Association of Governments. Today we're going to provide an update on air quality, specifically ozone, and the impact that the veto of Proposition 400 has on our air quality and the challenges that we face. So I'm going to turn it over to Tim. He's going to do most of the talking, and then we'll take questions at the end.
Great. Good morning, members of the subcommittee. Madam Chair, thank you for having me this morning. Again, my name is Tim Franquist, Environmental Director with the Maricopa Association of Governments. I think it's important to note that MAG is the lead planning agency for air quality in our region, so we do all the air quality planning for carbon monoxide, ozone, and particulate matter, and that's smoke and dust-sized particles. So, as I said, we're going to start with the ozone and pretty much stick with the ozone standard today. And I think it's important just to point out that this is a health-based standard. So the U.S. EPA goes through a process, a health-based process to decide what this standard is. We'll talk a little bit about that over time. But in the today, we are dealing with the 2015 ozone standard. As you can see there, it's a 70 parts per billion standard. The two ranges that we show in the data charts here, the 75 to 80, the upper end of that is the air that we breathe. So we're very aware that we get the wildfires from outside the area. We also get international transport of ozone from outside the area. So that upper end does represent what we breathe as a society. The lower end, the 75 parts per billion, is the standard that we're able to use from a regulatory standpoint. What I mean by that is we can remove the wildfire data, and if we do that, we can see that we're sitting around the 75 parts per billion. The reason that's important is that 75, that 5 parts per billion delta from the health-based standard to 70 parts per billion, it is a major cliff, and we'll talk a little bit about that here in just a second. And just in terms of, where does, what influences air quality, we can kind of see the icons here. They actually do represent the 3 different ways that air quality is impacted. So obviously meteorology plays into that. The topography plays big into that. So of course our valley, and then emission sources. So we both have natural emission sources, and then we have human caused. Oh, let me just tap back right there. The map that we're showing there is the non-attainment areas. So when we don't meet a health-based standard, the EPA designates an area that's not meeting that standard. And what we can see here by the blue outline is this is the non-attainment area for the 2015 standard. As we can see here, it encompasses most of the metro area, certainly the major urban corridor. So what causes ozone? So unlike some pollutants like carbon dioxide, which is a direct pollutant that comes right from your tailpipe or from an industrial stack, ozone is considered a secondary pollutant. So it actually requires volatile organic compounds. Those can come from wildfires, as I spoke about, from paint booths, from solvent facilities. Some plants can actually give off VOCs. That has to be reacted with what's referred to as oxides of nitrogen. That's typically from fossil fuel combustion, so vehicles is the primary source here in the area, but industrial sources play into that. The real key to ozone is that those 2 chemicals, the VOCs and the NOx, have to react in the presence of sunlight, which we know in Arizona, especially here in Phoenix, we get about 330 days of sunlight. That ultraviolet radiation actually drives the reaction, and unfortunately, the Phoenix metro area is a prime area for, unfortunately, ozone formation. So So where does the actual ozone come from? So what we can see here in our pie charts here, the dark blue, it actually comes from somewhere else. So most of the ozone in our area actually comes from outside the blue boundary that we saw on the map earlier. So what we can see in the colored portion, the light blue, and then the other portions here is the ozone that's from our area. Again, the challenge, and this is where the Prop 400 piece I think really begins to come in, that 18 to 17%, as low as 13 out in the Tonto area, is actually from on-road vehicles. Only the U.S. EPA in California can set what's referred to as tailpipe standards, so emission standards from your vehicle. This is, I think, from an air quality perspective, why I was so concerned when I saw the Prop 400 get vetoed. We can only plan for single occupancy vehicles, getting people on public transit, and really having these transportation congestion projects in place to control the ozone in our region from a local perspective. So again, we can't set the tailpipe standards, only California and the U.S. EPA can do that. And so we're left with our largest portion of homegrown emissions, this 18 or so percent from on-road vehicles. So again, from a Prop 400 standpoint, these congestion mitigation projects, and we'll see a little bit later on, these public transit routes are really, really critically important. So there's really no silver bullet when it comes to ozone. So there's no one control measure that would say this would do it all. So for example, if we were to remove all the fossil fuel vehicles in Maricopa County off the road, and that's somewhere in the neighborhood of about 4 million vehicles, we would reduce ozone concentrations by about seven parts per billion. So we would barely make the standard if we removed all vehicles off the road. So we talk about projects associated with Prop 400. There's no one project that would do away with our ozone problem, but it would certainly help us. So things like getting people on buses, getting folks on the light rail, these congestion mitigation projects are absolutely helping air quality. And so again, I think it was alarming when we saw that veto for many different reasons, but from an air quality perspective, it actually is going to harm air quality. So in terms of the standards over time, so what we can see here is that the EPA has a chance every 5 years and is required to take a look at each pollutant that they regulate, so in this case ozone, and you can see about every 5 to 10 years they do change that standard. So we started at the 1997 standard, we went to the 2008, and then ultimately to the 2015. So I think there's a lot of things we can talk about on this slide, but I think the one real important key pieces to talk about is that air quality is actually improving over time. So that's a story I don't think we hear very often. Anytime we read the news or hear the news, we often hear about bad air quality, and that's because we do have a changing standard. Now that is important because that is a health-based standard, so as we understand more about the science of these different pollutants, then obviously the trend has been to lower these standards. But what you can see here is that it does drastically change over time. And again, I think that's a story that we don't often tell, is that the air quality is actually improving for the most part, with the exception of ozone. I think, again, that's why it was important to talk to this issue today. So if we look at the end of this graph here, we can see kind of two tails. We can see the blue tail and this red tail. The blue line represents, again, the air that we breathe. This is the air that vulnerable adults are breathing. This is what our children are breathing. What most folks don't realize, with children, they do breathe the same amount of air as an adult. They just breathe faster than we do, so they actually take in these pollutants more than we do. So this is the air that we breathe on the blue line. The red line actually represents if we were to exclude wildfires. We've certainly been impacted by California and our own wildfires, so the red line represents what we believe if we remove those wildfires, where we would end up, and that's about 76 parts per billion. So with that, so recently the region, our area, what's referred to as the Phoenix Mesa non-attainment area for the 2015 ozone standard was bumped up to moderate non-attainment. So we have kind of a table of increasing stringency in programs as we don't meet the standard. And so obviously as we don't meet the standard, those programs become more stringent, there's more of them. So today we will have to look at new control measures. That's going to be a big issue for this area. We really haven't put in ozone control measures en masse for about 20 years. So we're going to definitely need a lot more measures coming into place. We're also going to be dealing with air quality permitting changes. So today we do have what's referred to as an emission offset for new major sources. That threshold, and we'll talk a little bit about that in a moment, is about to change, and I think that'll have drastic impacts on our economy as that happens. One thing I would say is, the City of Phoenix has been a leader on their control program, so I want to mention that is please continue to what you're doing with your transit programs, your fleet replacements. All those actually reduce ozone precursors, and so Phoenix has been a fantastic leader on this. Please keep keep that up, and please let our colleagues know that this is the way to go. Fleet replacements is probably the one big thing that most municipalities can do right now. In terms of timing, unfortunately, like most issues that we're dealing with, timing is the essence. Right now, we're looking at a potential bump up to a serious non-attainment status. So, again, what you can see here is the different stages of non-attainment. We're currently at moderate. We have until 2024 to meet this standard. And again, if you remember, we're about 6 parts per billion off, which is very, very significant. If we don't make the 2024 deadline, we're looking at a 2027 deadline of serious non-attainment. And again, what you can see here is we're moving very quickly into California level controls. The amount of programs and the significant reduction in ozone required is going to be huge. And if we don't get to that point by 2024, and it's going to be hard to do, I'll just be candid about that. It's going to be very difficult for us to get there. When we start to look at serious, the air quality permitting changes, which changes our economic landscape on who can come into the area. It also requires additional control programs. So again, we're just layering on additional programs from here. So in terms, again, where the Prop 400 piece comes in, again, I think this is a really, really important piece as we start to move into this legislative season. And I'm sure we've had these discussions here, both air quality and Prop 400, but I think it's important that we start to look at what are the transit routes at risk. And what we can see up here in the red are the Prop 400 funded routes. Again, there's no silver bullet in terms of reducing ozone in one different control program, but it takes a lot of different control programs working together to actually reduce ozone. And what we can see here is a very, very important one for society, but two for ozone reduction. So again, I think it's important that we continue to get the word out to both the public and to our legislators that this is important for our economy, but it's absolutely important for our public health as well, since this ozone standard is a public health standard. In terms of cost, again, the hammer in air quality typically is your economy, as we talked about these different control programs. They're not cheap to implement. When we talk about the permitting that goes along with the air quality, these different emission offsets are very, very difficult to impossible to get. And so we unfortunately get businesses that may not locate in our region. They may locate in Arizona, maybe just not in the non-attainment area. And so what we can see here is a cost estimate we did over at DEQ when I was there. There's a very, very conservative annual estimate of about $107 million, or excuse me, $100 million. That bumps up to about $250 million per year. What we can see is a more recent study in Oklahoma City and Corpus Christi. Again, this tracks about the same. We're a much larger economy than those cities, and so we would expect to be in the hundreds of millions, if not billions of dollars over that period of time when we're in non-attainment. And you can kind of see at the bottom here how those costs are calculated. One is the loss of economic activity due to businesses not showing up for the permitting reasons, different controls that they may have to put in that they wouldn't have to put in if they were in a different area. So again, it's not cheap to be in non-attainment and certainly not healthy. So with that, again, appreciate the opportunity just to kind of talk again about the air quality challenge with the ozone and the Prop 400. This is kind of a storm that unfortunately came together at the worst possible time. We need to get all these different control programs in place to help reduce ozone. We rely on the public transportation infrastructure, the congestion mitigation, the public transit projects out of Prop 400 to help with that. Again, I think we get that word out, we get this Prop 400E passed, we have a really good chance of both protecting public health and the environment. And with that, I'm happy to take any questions.
Thank you so much for that presentation. Any questions, Councilwoman Stark?
So if the legislature were to take this up again this year, given we have a new governor, we might have a chance of getting it passed. Will that still work for what we need to achieve as far as getting it on a ballot? And
Madam Chair, members of the subcommittee, I think it would go a long way. Again, I don't think there's any one silver bullet, but yes, if it got on the legislative agenda this year, we get it passed, we'd have time to get things in motion and get the projects that are on the books funded. And I think that's the biggest key is we have those projects out there, they're on the books. We just, for that extension, we just need to have that assurance that that funds are there. So I think the answer to that is yes. Again, does it solve the ozone problem? It doesn't in one swoop, but it definitely helps us get a long ways down that path.
So if, hopefully that will be a priority for our council. And we have a pretty aggressive program for electric vehicles. Will that help as well? And do other cities within the MAG area, are they also pursuing?
Madam Chair, members of the subcommittee, Phoenix is doing a fantastic job, and that's why I wanted to highlight it. So when coming here, what was really easy to do is say, hey, keep doing what you're doing, be a leader in that. Other areas, I don't want to call them out by name just because they are MAG members. Some are very aggressive on the fleet replacements. It's expensive, so it's not, I don't think, a desire or lack of desire. It's just, it's costly. There are plenty of programs out there in the today, Inflation Reduction Act is certainly one. There are federal programs that will help with this as well. So again, I would say, Phoenix is doing a great job, be a leader. There's other municipalities in the area that are also doing that, but I think, again, if we just get the word out that this is really, really important, and if you have those funds, especially for the fleet replacements, very, very important to do right now.
Thank you. Thank you.
Thank you. Any other, Councilwoman Ansari?
Thank you so much for the presentation. I think very sobering and alarming as well. Obviously, as you mentioned, thank you for the props. This past 2 years, the City of Phoenix, we've passed a climate plan, an EV roadmap, and a fleet transition plan, which is great, but also you are clearly showing us that we still need to take drastic action to even have a shot at not reaching serious non-attainment over the next 6 months. So I guess I would love to ask you, just point blank, what would it take for us to not reach serious non-attainment when we only have a very short, window of time?
Madam Chair, members of the subcommittee, I think it's a great question, and it is a sobering question. So like I mentioned, if we removed every single fossil fuel vehicle off the roads, we would probably be in attainment. So it's that level of emission reductions that we'll need. So it's a significant lift. It's a heavy lift. I would say we can get there if we work together, get this word out. It's really going to be an impact to the businesses. A lot of these control programs are on the backs of our businesses. So I think we do need to work with them, let them know how important this is. It tends to fall on the backs of very specific businesses. Obviously, our utilities are always kind of a big bullseye. Obviously, the transportation sector is a big bullseye just because of the largest areas of emission sources. So I think trying to work with our businesses to let them know, hey, this is really important, and we can't kind of do this type thing. We're all going to have to kind of pull together. Otherwise, we're all going to be harming our economy together. So again, I think the sobering answer is we're going to have to do a whole bunch. Like I said, if we removed every single fossil fuel vehicle off the road, we might be there. So that's kind of gives you an example of the level of controls that we'll have to put in place to meet this standard.
And this is within the next 6 months.
Madam Chair, members of the subcommittee, it's actually within the next year. So it's a little more than 6 months, but the time is short. If we don't make that time frame, we do get another 3 years. And so I think it's important that we start now, even if we don't make the deadline of 2024. That gives us a real big jump on the 2027 deadline. So the faster we can come out of that non-attainment status, which we can do mid-period, would be critical. So anything we do now is as important as we would do later.
Okay, well, I think before I go to my next question, can you elaborate a little bit? You mentioned that 107 million, right, number around like the financial losses we would face if we were to hit serious non-attainment. Did I understand that correctly?
Correct.
Okay. Can you elaborate a little bit more on like what that means? Because obviously Arizona, Phoenix, we are a very pro-business environment. We pride ourselves on that. Can you, for those who take that very seriously and want to continue seeing that for the city of Phoenix, can you elaborate a little bit on what reaching serious non-attainment would do to shift that?
Madam Chair, members of the committee, I'll try to stay away from the permitting 101, but I think that's where we get into something that's called an emission offset. So what we saw on the one slide is, yes, us missing the opportunity to bring in a new business because we don't have those emission offsets. So in the today, we have 0 emission offsets. So if let's say a utility size facility came in, a APS or SRP gas plant, that's usually referred to as a major source. It's 100 tons per year. That's a very, very large source. If we go to serious non-attainment, that 100 tons per year major threshold drops to 50 tons. So now we're not talking about utility size facilities. Now we're talking about pretty normal sized new businesses. So they could potentially avoid coming in the area because we just don't have offsets. Now, doesn't mean they necessarily don't come into Arizona. What it means is they probably locate outside the non-attainment area. But what you could see with those
So
standards,
outside of Phoenix?
outside of Phoenix,
Okay.
correct. And so what you can see with those standards changing, every time we change a standard, we typically expand the non-attainment area. So in the today, you may not be in the 2015 non-attainment standard, but as you can see, about every 10 years or so, that standard drops, that area expands. And so even if those businesses coming into the area today that may not be in the non-attainment area, they could be tomorrow. A very real-world example, I think, would be the Taiwanese chip manufacturer. They are being permitted right now today as a 90-ton per year facility to stay under that 100-ton per year threshold. If that permit were not to come out before that facility would operate, they would actually be over that 50-ton per threshold under Sirius, and they likely wouldn't be able to locate in the city of Phoenix. Now, $40 billion investment, I think the White House gets involved. I think TSCM comes here, but again, where they locate may be a question. So long-winded way of saying that it impacts us by avoided businesses. Businesses have to put on additional control measures. They have to come up with these emission offsets if they're under a certain threshold. So again, sometimes it's just easier to move outside of that non-attainment area.
That is very helpful. I think we need to get that message out loud and clear. I like just hearing that from you. You know, TSMC is the, hallmark example of an incredible foreign investment. And you're saying even something like that, and we talk about all of the other things that could come to Phoenix as a result of that, which would be great for our economy. But here we are dangerously close to reaching serious non-attainment, which means that those businesses would not be able to come here after 2024. So I just want to emphasize that. I think that as, from the city side, we, something I often hear when I'm pushing for anything that has to do with, electric vehicles or public transportation, number one is how much time it's going to take, and number two is the fractional cost, higher than a fossil fuel powered vehicle that we still are worried about. But here you are telling us that we could potentially be, losing or feeling $107 million in financial implications. So I just think that's really important to show. What would be very helpful from Nancy and the team is knowing what are the most urgent actions we could take over the next 6 months, over the next year as a council, because that's all we have authority over, to give us the best chance of not reaching it. I mean, obviously, we're not taking every single car off the road, but what can we do that we do have power over? Then what can we do in the next 2 years, 3 years? We just took a trip, a couple of us council members and the mayor, to Houston to look at their bus rapid transit system. It was great. We're bringing it to Phoenix, but we are not getting it till 2028. I mean, I think the timelines we're working off of for anything that has to do, all of these issues that directly relate back to where we're at with our air quality, we are treating them as though they are not urgent and they're not priorities and they don't have financial implications, even though they really, really do, and they will hurt us economically. So I feel very strongly that we need to be doing a lot more. We have all of these plans that are great, but there's pieces in the plans that we could spend funds on this year to implement that will save us money in the long term. So I guess that's a request of what can we do if you had your dream list of policy initiatives in the short term to get there. That would be incredibly helpful. Thank you.
Thank you so much for that. Anyone else? Any other questions, comments? Okay, hearing none. Thank you guys so much for that important
Madam Chair,
subject.
you do have one speaker.
Oh, we have one more speaker. Thank you.
We have one speaker for this item joining us virtually, Dan Penton. Dan, are you on the line?
Yes, thank you. Thank you, Madam Chair and members of the subcommittee. Thank you for that presentation as well. I just had a couple concerns. With the biggest, large contributor of, greenhouse gases and carbon emissions would be vehicle idling. And recently, since the pandemic, we've seen an uptick in fast food restaurants, especially drive-throughs, being approved by the city in largely residential areas. And I just want to know if this is ever something that's ever been addressed or looked at to find out, what type of carbon capture technologies are out there to be basic that could be, stipulated to or included in the development process that would, require fast food or any facility with a drive-through to meet clean air quality guidelines or show some type of carbon sequestration or technology that's on their in their projects that would help benefit help reduce improve the air quality and reduce carbon emissions. That was just one of the things. I know that ASU has been leading in a lot of ways with carbon capture technologies, and it's just something that I hear a lot in the community, especially with a lot of these drive-throughs, coming through, and a lot of them with double lanes, and their lines are backed up. So it's just, it's a big contributor, and I've thought if that maybe we could find a way to kind of help it reduce idling, that would go a long way to maybe helping the issue resolve. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you for those comments. Do we have any answers for this? Thank you.
Madam Chair, members of the subcommittee, idling is a problem, and I think, again, to kind of harken back to the Prop 400E piece, one aspect that we can control is obviously single occupancy vehicles, getting folks out of just the one vehicle. The other aspect is congestion mitigation projects. So a slow car is a polluting car, an idle car is a polluting car, and I do think we have seen with the pandemic a real high rise in pulling up and stopping, so we do see a lot of idling. So your catalyst under your vehicle has to be hot to work correctly. So if it's sitting cool, it's not operating optimally. So again, there are numbers out there. We are investigating that, but again, it doesn't take an air quality degree to recognize there's a lot of idling going on, a lot of different freight, and so that's no indictment of those companies. We like those; they were super helpful. But again, when we balance this, air quality issue with things like idling, congestion mitigation. Idling, congestion mitigation definitely plays in negatively to air quality, so it does actually increase ozone concentration. So again, anything we can do to jump out of our vehicles and go into a store, definitely better for the environment when we can do that.
And just so there is a regulation, Maricopa County, for diesel engines, anti-idling. I think it's over 5 minutes, but not for gasoline-powered engines.
Great, thank you. Thank you so much for that. Any other comments, questions? Well, thank you. Thank you for your presentation. And now we will move on to item 8, which is Waste Zero, Phoenix Zero Waste and Circular Economy Roadmap. And we will start with a presentation from the Public Works Department.
Madam Chair, members of the subcommittee, Director Joe Giudice and his team will provide this presentation.
Good morning, Madam Chair, and morning, members of the subcommittee. Pleasure to be here with you this morning and continue the theme of protecting our environment and public health. In our conversations. Here we'll be talking about how we can do that through the management of our waste. So joining me today are Felipe Moreno, our Assistant Public Works Director, who leads our solid waste utility, and Amanda Jordan, who is titled as our Circular Economy Project Manager, but I like to highlight, because this is very unique to Phoenix, Amanda works in our Community and Economic Development Department and our Public Works Department, and that's because we wanted to have an economic development viewpoint to developing circular economy as we do our waste to resource vision going forward. So they're going to present to you today what I would consider a framework for our zero waste plan. The city has adopted both through the Climate Action Plan and other city plans, zero waste by the year 2050, like our sustainability plan, as well as a goal to have 50% waste diversion by the year 2030. And so we've been working on a framework for that. Our objective today is to share with you the framework, seek input. We're discussing a public comment or a public process here, so certainly seeking your input on our framework and the public process. This is really the beginning stages of getting out to the public and building this plan into an executable, actionable plan. With that, I'm going to pass it over to Felipe.
Good morning, Madam Chair, members of the subcommittee. Excited to be here to talk about our zero waste roadmap. All right, so Phoenix has been at the forefront of waste diversion efforts clear back into the early 90s, late 80s, with our being the first city of commingled recycling in the nation, so being able to not have to separate your materials, but actually put everything into one blue barrel that you see, all the way up to being an innovator and a leader in the nation in circular economy with our Resource Innovation Campus. And then also being invited to be the first city in the nation to be invited to be part of the Ellen MacArthur Foundation, which is a global institute around circular economy. So Phoenix is definitely not new to circular economy and waste diversion efforts, and we continue to lead the way there. As Joe mentioned, we have our 2021 Climate Action Plan, and the Zero Waste Roadmap closely aligns with that in the areas that are called out relating to solid waste in the Climate Action Plan, centering around enhanced programs and services, increasing participation in these programs and services from our residents in Phoenix and our community, as well as reducing GHG emissions at the landfill, and then also redeveloping brownfield, which is a great example with the AZ Fresh project of a redevelopment project that's highly successful and we're super excited about. To give you an idea of where we are in the waste diversion effort, the national average sits around 32%. Phoenix is currently above the national average at 36%. And as Joe mentioned, we have two primary goals that this roadmap is centered around, which is our 2030 goal of 50% diversion, as well as our zero waste goal by 2050. So this roadmap really focuses on two things. Zero waste, obviously, as defined by having a minimum of 90% waste diversion, is considered zero waste as we define it, but also circular economy. And that's a major focus of this roadmap because we recognize that recycling alone doesn't get us to move the needle and get us to these goals. So we have to look at a circular economy concept, which really focuses on recirculating material back into supply chains at the highest value, regenerating nature through use of materials, and designing out waste and pollution wherever possible. So not just recycling in the traditional sense, but also finding ways to put that back in the local economy and not have to use virgin materials and mine new resources and just continue to regenerate what we already use. Phoenix has a lot of existing programs in the area of waste diversion and circular economy, and so obviously we have our Phoenix Recycles program, which we're very proud of. Again, we're one of the first in the country to do commingled recycling. We have a state-of-the-art composting facility, which allows us to take organics. We're working on actually harvesting more on the food waste side with the depackager that our partner that runs the composting facility has recently installed. Very excited about that. Do a lot of education and outreach with our zero waste team out in the community. We do tours at the transfer stations, get out into the schools, into the community to educate our public on circular economy and zero waste practices. We do sustainable purchasing. One great example is recently we've started purchasing our uniforms for our employees through recycled material, as well as printing paper and things like that. So we're very focused on just having a sustainable purchasing policy even internally. Circular economy efforts, the Resource Innovation Campus being the biggest area that we're focusing on there. And then research and pilot testing. So Amanda's going to talk a little bit later on kind of some of the details on some of the projects we have in that space around micro manufacturing of plastics and even testing some materials at our MRFs to see what we can capture down the road. But most importantly is how do we reach our diversion goals? And there's really 5 pillars that we're focusing on. The first is diversity, equity, and inclusion. So everything that we do is contemplated on this pillar of making sure that we are focusing on the diverse landscape of our city, the diverse communities, making sure that everyone has access to the information that we're providing in a way that makes sense to them and is straightforward, and everybody has access to the services that we put forward in a way that's inclusive, that's convenient, and that's accessible. We also are looking at investing in technology. So some examples, we've upgraded the equipment at our resource materials recovery facility at North Gateway to recapture more materials there. We're doing a total model of our MRF at the 27th Avenue transfer station. So that's going to have the state-of-the-art equipment to really put us on the forefront of recovering the most material possible in the best, most efficient way possible. Education and outreach, as we mentioned, we do a lot of that work with our zero waste team, but really ramping up, how do we get to the areas that are not as engaged? And so we have a lot of areas that do the right thing and we reach them easily, but we got to really make sure we're reaching everybody and really contemplating what is important to the community and how do we bring services that make sense to them, and not how we think it should be, but how is it going to be convenient and accessible for our diverse populations across the city. And we do that through enhanced programs and services that are driven by all of this, the technology, the listening to the community, and then how do we contemplate putting those programs together that make sense. And then public-private partnerships. This is critical because we are prohibited by city code to provide collection to commercial businesses, restaurants, multifamily. And so where we're not able to provide that direct service, we want to work with our private haulers, with the business community and the public to be influencers in that area and see how we can partner to encourage and promote sustainable practices and waste diversion in those areas that we don't directly service. And with that, I'll turn it over to Amanda, who's going to talk more about our public engagement plan and some of the details to get us to our 2030 and zero waste goal of 2050.
Okay, thank you, Felipe. Madam Chair, members of the subcommittee, I'd like to use the rest of our time to talk through some more specifics within the roadmap. So first and foremost, we'll be focusing on public engagement. As Felipe emphasized, diversity, equity, inclusion is of utmost importance as we are defining our strategies. And so we intend to do public engagement through two pathways, the first being focused stakeholder engagement with public and private sector entities in the space of waste management. We presented to the Environmental Quality and Sustainability Commission last November 2022, and they have confirmed they will be supporting us in identifying those key stakeholders to engage for these particular meetings. And then we'll also be doing more traditional community engagement and outreach, partnering on already established events, village planning committee meetings, things of that nature. And the goal for public engagement will be several components, of course, increasing waste diversion participation by residents, bringing awareness to the tools and programs that currently exist, and identify areas for improvement where we may not be providing enough services to residents, engaging with opportunity zones to better identify their needs and how we can support them in achieving these waste diversion goals, understand who in the community is not currently engaged in these conversations and how to get them to the table, and of course continue to build upon our 2030 and 2050 strategies tied to the waste diversion goals while simultaneously building an inclusive circular economy that accounts for the human health and well-being components of what we're doing. So the roadmap diverges into two paths. The first, 50% diversion by 2030 roadmap. So here you can see the 4 pillars that we focus upon. First being recycling, which is our foundational program. Here we have a variety of updates happening, but as Felipe mentioned, we are undergoing a revamp of our 27th Avenue material recovery facility, which will be installed with some of the latest and greatest technology to increase diversion of materials and include other key components such as a program that allows private sector, when they are altering the materials in their products, to partner with us, send us those materials, and we test the capturability of them in the facility, which will be a first of its kind program. Within composting, we have the depackager on site at the facility in anticipation for Super Bowl and the waste diversion needs there, as Felipe mentioned. Also exploring circular organic solutions, so where can we integrate technology and those types of solutions to help elevate the organics and food waste diversion efforts. Education, continuing to improve upon our existing programming as well as establish what we call a master recycler program, similar to a master gardener program, so identifying the allies in the community that can help spread knowledge. And then within circular economy, we have 2 key components happening between now and 2030. The first being a pilot project in partnership with Arizona State University to test micro-manufacturing with plastic waste and tying it into a cooperative economic development business model. And then developing our Resource Innovation Campus. So under partnership with C40, we are in the middle of essentially an RFP process to get the actual campus building built out and activated. And then moving into zero waste by 2050, majority of the items here are what we consider to be visionary and mostly tied to circular economy. We anticipate that all of the activities between now and 2030 will then lead to updates and reinform how we achieve our zero waste by 2050 strategy. But a few components that we've identified in terms of the Resource Innovation Campus. So how do we integrate other programs and components like a virtual materials marketplace in support of an in-person physical reuse center where materials during construction can be brought to that site and residents can come and purchase and reuse them rather than sending to landfill. Exploring how we can reactivate entrepreneurial ecosystem development. We used to have a program called the Resource Innovation and Solutions Network Incubator that was under Reimagine Phoenix in partnership with ASU. So we're looking at how do we reactivate that type of opportunity and really start to bring small businesses and startups into the fold. In terms of circular economy, looking at a circular economy marketplace in the same sense of a farmer's market. So taking the components of the RIC and bringing them out to the community in all of the different districts so they don't have to go to the physical location. And then, of course, exploring methane to fuel conversion at our SR 85 landfill, conducting an updated waste characterization assessment. Our last one was done fiscal year 2017-2018, and then continuing to map out equitable waste diversion incentives. So next steps from here, we are preparing to translate the roadmap to Spanish. As I mentioned, we are developing the public engagement plan in collaboration with EQSC and, of course, subcommittee, mayor, and council. And then we are targeting to commence the engagement process by end of Q1. And I do also want to mention that we've recently onboarded a bilingual zero waste analyst who will be helping us give presentations fully in Spanish so that we can ensure everyone is met where they're at. And that's that. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you for that presentation. With that, do we have any speakers on this item? No. Questions, comments? Councilwoman Stark?
Thank you. On this public engagement plan, you'll be meeting with each of us individually for suggestions? Is that, or are you going to give a more formal presentation, council at large?
Chairwoman, Councilwoman Stark, we will be doing individual briefings with you to get your input. So we wanted to share this with you here. And then certainly if you have comments, but we can come back with our actual engagement plan and schedule those briefings with you as part of our process over the next 3 to 4 months as we start to plan to roll this out. Because we'd certainly love your guidance on community organizations you'd like us to meet with in your districts and things like that. So that's definitely part of the input we'll be seeking.
That's great. And I would suggest that you worked with our school liaison. I think getting to the schools and to the students at an early age really make a difference. So, thank you. Thank you, Madam Chair.
Thank you. Any other comments, questions? Well, thank you guys for that presentation. And now we will move to item 9, which is a park ranger hiring update. We will begin with a presentation from our Deputy City Manager, Inger Erickson, in the Parks and Recreation Department.
Madam Chair, members of the subcommittee, Director Aguilar and Deputy Director Rogers will have the presentation.
Good morning, Madam Chair, members of the subcommittee. I'm here today with Deputy Director Jared Rogers, who oversees our Natural Resources Division, which includes direct oversight of our Park Ranger program, both in the urban parks and in the mountain preserves. So I'm going to go ahead and introduce and turn over the presentation to Jared.
Thank you, Cynthia, and good morning, Madam Chair and members of the subcommittee. I'm here to give an update on the Park Ranger program and the current state of our staffing levels and what our park rangers are doing in the parks. It's important to start by saying that our park rangers there's one real job classification of a park ranger. There's supervisors and there are rangers, but they are given separate assignments. They are either assigned to the mountain preserves and desert parks, or their primary focuses is in the urban parks. But our rangers can kind of move back and forth between those two assignments from year to year, but their job function over the course of a year, they'll be focused either in the preserves or in the urban parks. I'll start by talking a little bit more about those rangers that are assigned to the mountain preserves and desert parks. They're assigned to three main areas. They might be assigned to the north area, which would include the Sonoran Preserve, Deem Hills, and North Mountain, etc. They might also be assigned to the east area, which would be Camelback, Papago Park, Piestewa Peak, and Dreamy Draw. Or they could be assigned to South Mountain Park, or the south area, which includes South Mountain Park and the Rio Salado Habitat Restoration Area. The mountain park rangers, their primary focus is on the preserves, protecting the preserves, supporting animal habitats, making sure that our hiking trails are in tip-top shape, making sure our trailheads and restrooms are clean and accessible. They also focus on educating the public relative to the code of conduct and various park rules. They also focus on safety, making sure hikers know how to hike safely. They also offer programs to help teach kids, as you can see in this image here, about preserves and the Sonoran Desert that we all live in. They also will help with emergency situations when the time comes. We have quite a few mountain rescues that happen over the course of the year, and our park rangers have a big part in supporting those situations. They'll help close trailheads to secure it so that our first responders can get up there and help those hikers. They communicate with park users, and they assist the first responders as needed. We don't really have statistics on this, but I think it's important to note that the education component of our rangers really help reduce the number of rescues that are ever necessary, because they're out there so frequently helping help people understand how to hike safely. The current staffing levels that we have in the preserves in those north, east, and south areas are shown here. The columns that you can see, if we were to work left to right, the first column is the areas, the east, north, and south. Ranger 3 position is a supervisor position, and you can imagine there's less of those than of our Ranger 2s. The supervisors in the east area, there's 2 with 1 vacancy. The north area is fully staffed at the moment. The south area has 3 with 1 vacancy. One of our rangers just retired. So then in the full-time Ranger 2 area, the next column, in the east area we have 14 with 2 vacancies. In the north area we have 17 with 2 and 19 with 1 vacancies. And then we do have some part-time ranger positions, which can be a little bit more difficult to keep filled. You'll see in the east area we have 6 part-time rangers, and 5 of those are vacant. The Ranger 2 position really is an entry level. We have a lot of rangers or city employees that have started at Ranger 2s and then worked their way up to other opportunities. And then, so you can see in the last column is our total rangers with the total numbers of rangers and vacancies that we have in each of those areas. So now I'll transition to talk a little bit, again, same job classification, but some of our rangers are assigned to the urban parks. And their primary responsibility when they're working in the urban parks is to educate the public about park rules and city ordinances. And as you're all aware, the primary tool that they have to use in doing that is the Code of Conduct that the Parks Board passed some time ago. And the Code of Conduct is behavior-based. It focuses on what people are doing in parks and how their behavior may be negatively impacting the park itself and other users. So our rangers are frontline in helping educate people about proper behavior in parks and helping maintain our parks in a safe way. The current staffing levels, and I'm pleased to report that we have fully staffed Ranger 3 positions, so they are the supervisors again. And then we have 24 positions in the Ranger 2 category with 1 vacancy at the moment. So amongst our total urban team, we have 28 rangers with 1 vacancy. And I'll pause just for a moment to mention that I mentioned earlier that our rangers can shift back and forth between areas, and that happens once a year. They have a shift bid, and they have an opportunity to go to the area that they'd like to work in. And so these numbers change from year to year, but right now, this is the current status. And then just to focus, both types of rangers, those are both ranger assignments that are in urban or in the preserves, really focus on these 4 things to help with guest satisfaction, park safety, the attractiveness of our parks, and the general usability. Current recruitment efforts, we just completed a round of recruitment from June to November of 2022, in which we were able to onboard 12 rangers. 10 of those were new hires to the city, 2 promoted to full-time positions from those part-time positions. And we have an ongoing park ranger recruitment. I think we're getting to the point where it's just going to be an ongoing cycle. We'll finish one and we'll start the next recruitment. So we're in the middle of one right now. We had 99 applicants, which is great. We're getting good response from that, and we're hoping to set up interviews in the coming weeks. So within the next, if you look at the timeline that we have there at the top of this slide, we would expect in the next 4 to 5 months to be able to hire the next round of rangers. And with that, we'll stop talking and we can have any questions or discussion that might be necessary. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you for that. Questions, comments? Councilwoman Ansari.
Thank you so much for the presentation. Couple of questions. So you mentioned the 24, was it 24 full-time park rangers or was it the 28?
There are 28 full-time rangers on the urban team positions.
Perfect.
27 are currently filled.
Okay. So I had done the math for 24, but basically very few rangers. It was 0.03 rangers per shift per park for the 24. So I guess I'm wondering, with 185 urban parks, how much of the time of these rangers would you say is spent at parks where we're seeing more issues than others?
So thank you, Madam Chair and Councilwoman Ansari. So I want to make sure I understand the question. How much time do our urban rangers spend at parks, those 28 rangers, on a given shift or day?
Yeah, at those parks, we a month ago we received the list of parks that have, more significant issues than others. Our park rangers, I'm trying to understand if they're spending their time equally amongst the, 180 plus urban parks that we have, or do they focus on ones that have more problems?
Yes, I would say that they definitely do tend to focus more on those where the issues are most prevalent. We have an electronic ranger log system that we keep, and we can retrieve numbers and find out, where we're focusing most of our efforts. And typically, where there's most issues, that's where our rangers spend the majority of their time.
Okay, I see. And then when you talked about the recruitment, June to November, the 10 new hires and whatnot, are those included in this 28 number, or are those going to be additional hires?
Those are included in the numbers before you.
Okay. So since we are on a good trajectory, I know, last month we had this conversation around how we could potentially, do a better job addressing issues that we're seeing at a few of our parks. How many more park rangers do you think it would take to address safety issues in our more critical parks? Is this something, are you feeling good that recruitment can continue at this level? Is there a need for more authorization for more funding? What is the barrier that you're facing here?
Sure, Madam Chair, Councilwoman, sorry. We've had discussions about that, Jared and I specifically, actually. It's very hard to come up with a number. If we had this number, this would be ideal. I think in terms of the way we share it now, and I think we've shared this statistic before, that on a typical day when all staff are in, when there's no one out sick, no vacancies, we have 3 ranger vehicles now on a typical shift patrolling for the entire city, right? So 3 vehicles with 2 rangers each, since they ride in pairs. We've talked about things like how many parks are they getting to in a typical shift, and depending on the type of situation they're addressing at each park, one day could look very different. They could get to 20 parks in one day, or they could get to 3 if they had some real serious issues. Mm-hmm. So it's really hard for us to to come up with a number of that. We've talked about things like, if the team was maybe double its size, we could potentially assign them to regions. We could do that now with the way they're distributed now, because again, we have 3 teams of 2 going on, and it's also it's preventative driven, but it's also complaint driven too, naturally, to try to get to the parks where we're receiving calls or concerns from whether it's the public or staff. So we think we're on a good trajectory now. For us, it's about keeping the positions filled. That's been a challenge. And so while the numbers on the urban team are good now with 1 vacancy, part of that was that we did just get 8 positions added in the fiscal year 22-23 budget. So before we had those 8 positions, obviously it was even more challenging. A typical day had 2 Ranger vehicles, I believe, with, and Jared can correct me if I'm wrong, was it 3 or 2? 2 with 2 Rangers in it. So we think we're in a good trajectory now if we can keep the positions filled, and we'll continue to monitor and determine what more our needs might be. But that's been one of our greatest challenges, was vacancies and having that lower number before those 8 positions were added.
Okay. Well, something that I think I would like to see, I know, council approved the pilot program to have security at some of our parks. I think, my hope is that can be a pilot and just a pilot, and that we can actually invest more in our park ranger program moving forward to have more park rangers. So if there could be, a thoughtful proposal on what is the number that we would need. Also the shifts, right? One of the issues was that we wanted overnight support available. And so could we add a 3rd shift option where park rangers could either be hired on specifically for night shifts, or maybe we offer that to our existing park rangers to take on as well. So that's what I would like to see, I think, for our medium to long term, is a very solid park ranger program where we're investing in our full-time employees, since they are the ones who have more authority to take action if needed. So that would be helpful, and I do appreciate the work that you've been doing. I think the other area I would like to see more focus and investment is park activation as well, and just seeing how, whether it's our police department and our block watches working with the parks department and communities to activate parks more, I think that would go a long way too. Thank you.
Thank you. I guess I would just also add, continue to emphasize, I know we've had this conversation before about the 3rd shift. I think that after that pilot was approved, I got a lot of negativity from constituents just because they didn't see the point of us doing that, given that our rangers have a lot more authority in the parks. So I definitely, if we cannot do it for this contract negotiations, I would like for us to really sit down with Espetia and figure out what would that look like, and then also how would that look into our fiscal budget for next year, or if this is something that can be covered through the bond. But I do think that thinking about that 3rd shift, I think it's incredibly important. I was looking at some of the comments that we got from some of the folks that are very concerned on this subject, and some of them are talking about having a dispatcher that's only taking phone calls with issues in the parks. We have some very problematic parks. I know that from the list that we figured there was about 3 of them in District 5, and it's more about how is it that we can get folks to report problems to a live person, and then having someone to be able to answer to those issues. Like, honestly, I don't think that having 28 park rangers is enough, right? I know that we continue to ask that question, what's the ideal number? But I don't know if this is something that we should be talking to our park rangers about and asking them, what do they think the ideal number is? How many park rangers does it really take to really implement a lot of the programs like code of conduct? We've put a lot of things on our park rangers in the last 3 years that I think in order for us to continue to give the quality of work to them and to be able to really service our constituents, I just don't think that 28 is enough. And I would really like for us, I know that we're working on a 10-year plan, a parks plan, and I'm hopeful that we can put that in the works in terms of how do we figure some of that stuff out. I would really like at some point, Cynthia, for you to come in and tell us, in order for us to service our parks the way we need to, these are how many park rangers we want, because I think we've asked that question more than once already on how many park rangers do we actually need. And also another question for Jared, I guess, the 99 applicants that we have, how many of those folks are interested in filling in the 16 vacant? Because we have 16 vacants for the preserves, right?
Yeah, Madam Chair, let me just check my numbers on that. That is
16? Yeah,
Yeah.
I think so.
in the preserves. Yeah, 16. Yes.
And I guess and maybe this is going to be more a question for Dave soon, but it's more what can be the turnaround? How fast can we hire into these positions? And from those 99 applicants, are there any of the folks that already have some experience doing park ranger work?
Yeah, Madam Chair, thank you. That's a good question. Having not reviewed all of the 99, I could say generally we do have a fair amount that will have a background. A lot of our rangers that come on will have previous careers in law enforcement, or we have a principal at one of our, as a park ranger, a current park ranger, a former principal, 20 years as a principal. There's a wide variety of backgrounds that they come from, and a lot of them have real life skills that help translate really well to being a park ranger. A percent I couldn't give you, but amongst 99, I'm sure we have enough to fill those current vacancies.
And how soon do you think you'll have those positions filled?
And Madam Chair, members of the subcommittee, I would say now that the application process has produced 99 candidates, now staff is reviewing the applications, working with the HR to do that. So my best guess to review those applications and schedule at least first interviews is that we're at least maybe 3 weeks out from that. It does take time to screen those 99 applicants. And so I would say best guess a few weeks just to get first interviews. And then second interviews are usually warranted, but not always. Okay, so no seconds for this position, just the first, and then it takes a couple weeks after we've interviewed them, usually for a background check process and to onboard.
And why does it take 3 weeks to interview people?
What we usually do in general, especially with the list that's 99 people, we can give criteria for HR to screen some of those out, but we still like to go through them, usually individually, to make sure we're screening the most highly qualified candidates against our criteria. So screening through 99 applications does take time, so I would say that alone would take a week, and then we try to give people 2 weeks' notice from when we call them for an interview. Sometimes less, that's just standard.
Yeah, well, I think that we should try to see if there's a way that we can expedite that, because I know that's where we also lose people, that people apply for the jobs and then it takes a month for us to call them, and I think that's where we lose, especially the good quality people. They go out and they apply for a bunch of jobs. And hoping to be able to get into the city of Phoenix, but our process takes too long, so I'm hopeful that we can expedite that just a little bit more. That I think that would be great. And then my other question was, when we're doing the bidding, do people get bumped out of their positions?
Madam Chair, yes, it's based on seniority, so the potential is that you can be bumped out of your position. If somebody senior to you wants to work in that shift, then you would, vacate that, and then you'd have an opportunity based on your seniority to find another shift that you would go to.
And then do folks then leave for that reason? Maybe there's some people that like the preserves, or maybe other people that like the flatlands. Is that a reason why some of the folks have left?
Madam Chair, members of the subcommittee, we've had some of those challenges. We've talked a lot about how people may become a park ranger for one or the other specifically. Either they have a love and a passion for the preserves or the opposite for the flatlands. And what happens in a shift bid being based on seniority is if I'm potentially a lease senior park ranger and I'm in the preserves, which is what I came to the city of Phoenix to work as a park ranger to do, it is possible that in the shift bid process I could then be bumped into an assignment in the urban parks. At that point, we have had people leave, say they would like to leave, just because it was an assignment that they weren't necessarily interested in. And I could say that the opposite could also be true, an urban ranger then being bumped into a preserve.
Right, so then I guess also I would just recommend that we talk to Aspetia as well about that, just to see if there's a common ground that we can find as I understand seniority. I get it. We need to respect seniority. I also very passionate about that too. But I think that we just need to find some sort of happy medium, and I think that's another solution that I think we should find. So I guess just for me, just to condense, put everything together, the most critical thing for me is figuring out that third shift, right? And like Councilwoman Ansari said, making sure that that pilot is just a pilot and that we have something in place that we can bring to the full council. I understand, the concerns of other of my colleagues wanting to make sure that we are in the parks where we have the most issues. I also agree with that, but I think we should do it with park rangers. So I'm hopeful, maybe not next month, but maybe the following month, you guys coming in with a plan that you guys have talked to Aspetia about on how is it that we're able to implement that third shift. But other than that, thank you guys for that update. Other questions or comments? Councilmember Garcia? No? Okay. Okay, other than that, I think we will now move on to item 10, which is for discussion and possible action. Citywide recruitment and hiring process. We will begin with a presentation from Assistant Manager Lori Bays and Human Resources Department.
Madam Chair, members of the subcommittee, it looks like you just get Director David Matthews today.
Sounds like a plan.
Good morning, Madam Chair, members of the subcommittee. As requested by the subcommittee at the last meeting, today we're going to go over our recruitment and hiring steps, our past recruitment and hiring process, so what that process looked previous to this year, some rules and regulations that we have, specifically some personnel rules, our current process, some additional challenges we're facing, some other efforts we've done for those challenges, some options for contracting out to help with the recruitment process and speed up that timeline, and finally some recommendations. So whenever a vacant position needs to be filled at the city, there's certain basic steps that have to occur. Department requests a recruitment, we open the job, applicants apply. There's that initial screening that is now being done electronic. That's the questions you answer when you apply for the basic, do you meet the minimum qualifications? And then there's the department screening, which Parks just spoke with, where they select who that met the basic requirements they want to select for an interview. And then interviews are scheduled, job offers are extended, and ultimately a new employee or new employees, if there's multiple vacancies, start. As you'll see throughout this presentation, changing how these steps occur or when they occur can have a huge impact on not only the timeline, but the candidate experience when they apply for a job at the city. So prior to this last year, this is what our recruitment process looked like. I'm not going to go through every square you see on the screen. I just wanted to show you what the flow chart looked like. But I did want to highlight a few things with our prior process. This process resulted in very quick posting. So when a department had a vacancy, we were able to post that position very quickly. However, everything else occurred after the job closed. So interview panel was selected after the job closed. Interviews were scheduled after closing, which resulted in very limited notification to candidates and ultimately a long delay between closing and job offer. We do have a few current rules that limit how much we can change this process. For example, the personnel rules mention an eligible list. As you can see here, they specify that all vacancies at the city shall be filled by an individual on one of these eligible lists. So this has resulted in our employees being accustomed to the idea of an eligible list that lives on for 6 to 12 months. So I apply for a job, I'm put on a list, that list remains active for up to 12 months. I could be called to interview for any vacancies over the next 6 to 12 months for that job. So this, along with our past practices, does create some challenges when we look at better ways to conduct recruitment. However, within those existing personnel rules, we have been able to modify our process to make an impact on not only the recruitment timeline, but also, as I mentioned, that candidate experience, the notification, the information the candidate receives. So we currently have two options departments can use when they have a vacancy they need to fill. The first one is an eligible list recruitment. This process looks very similar to our past practice, where an ongoing list is created. So a position's posted, a list is created from everybody who applies that meets those minimum requirements, and then when a department has a vacancy that is that same classification, they're giving that same list of candidates. For example, Parks just mentioned the ranger process they did. This is the process they use, is this eligible recruitment process. So much like the past practice, everything, scheduling interviews and deciding on panel members, occurs after the job has closed, which can create some delays in timeline. There's a few other drawbacks to this method. Individuals are only contacted if they're selected for an interview. So as Parks mentioned, they have 99 applicants for that park ranger job. They may select, based on their department screening, to interview, let's just say 25 of those positions. Those other 74 individuals will not receive notification that they're not being interviewed because they're on an eligible list that lives on. So Parks may interview those first 25, select however many they select, maybe some individuals aren't successful, and then they may grab more from that eligible list to conduct another interview. So they're not selected they're not notified if they're not selected for an interview because they may be selected later. That list lives for 6 months up to 12 months. So what this creates is the applicant is in the dark on status, and I think that's where most of the concerns we hear from applicants comes from, is using this eligible list process, because we don't want to tell the applicant you didn't get the job because they're still on the list. They still may get the job. It just may be for a future vacancy or 4 months down the road when that list is used again for the process. Another drawback we find in this process is, if we're using that list for 6 months, the chances are most people on that list have found another job when we call them to interview 4 months down the road. It's a lengthy process. As I mentioned, limited notification to candidates throughout the process. And for us, it's very hard to track the timeline. I can tell you when the job closed and when the list was created, but every time a department has a vacancy, we'll send them that same list. It's really hard to track how long each process is taking. The second method we have is what we call position or process-based recruitment. And in this process, that list that's created only lives as long as that recruitment lives. So essentially the panel interviews, the panel individuals and the interviews are scheduled before the job is ever posted. The process closes once a selection is made, which creates better communication to candidates, because once a selection is made or multiple selections are made, anybody that applied for that process-based recruitment is notified that they did not get the position. They can then apply if that position reopens. So in the Parks case, if this method were to be used, we have 99 applicants, we interview 25, there's 74 left. Those 74 would be notified, or however, if we hired all 25, the 74 would be notified they did not get the job, and if we still have more vacancies, we would immediately repost and they could reapply, and then they'd go through that process and be notified again. This process results in a better overall candidate experience. So as a candidate, I'm being notified where I stand.
Councilwoman Stark, there's a question.
Yes. Thank you. So in the interview process, I did this for a long part of my career. It seemed like there was always a two-step interview process. Is that still pretty consistent?
Yes, Madam Chair, members of the committee. We still, it can be 1 or 2 interviews depending on what the position is and what the department would like to do. We do have many positions that are a single interview process, and we have others that are 2 interview process, so first and second round, but both of those are used in this process.
But you don't do the background check until the final interview? Okay.
That is correct.
Thank you.
So, as I mentioned at the last meeting, with this new process-based option that we have to use, we are able to gather really good data. Because everything is tied to one specific process, we can see exactly how long every step of the process takes. So these are our current averages since we went to this model. Is the opening job setup, which is from the time the supervisor gets permission from their supervisor to post a job to the time the job is posted, is taking 12 days. That job is posted, meaning advertised, for an average of 15 days. The hiring manager screening, so what happens in between there is the electronic screening. So as people are applying for the job, they're selecting their answers to those questions. If they meet the minimum qualifications, those are all sent to the hiring manager, and then it's taking the hiring manager on average 15 days to screen down to who they want to invite for an interview. The interview process, because they're scheduled prior to the job even being posted, shrinks dramatically with this model, and it only takes 5 days to complete both the first and second round on average of the interviews because they're scheduled prior to the job being posted. From the last interview to a job offer being accepted is averaging 25 days, and then the start date is 10 days. This is the one number that I can't really affect. This is individuals giving notice. So you've accepted my job offer now, when can you start, right? And there's notice and stuff that has to be given. So if we look at the total there, from the time the supervisor needs to fill a vacancy to the time someone starts is 82 days. If I drill down a little bit more to what I call the candidate experience, which is from the time the job closes to the time I'm notified if I got the job or not, that we're averaging 45 days using this model, this position-based model.
Councilwoman Ansari, question.
Hi, just one clarification question. During that 15 days for the job posting, is it possible for the hiring manager to start screening within that? Like, can it not be just on a first come, first serve, start reviewing and scheduling interviews?
So we might be able to start screening down. However, our job postings do say this closes on this specific date, and then resumes are reviewed. But we can explore kind of giving those to the hiring manager as it goes to start screening them down as they come in. We can certainly explore that, but we would want the job to run its whole advertising course before we invited individuals to interview.
But why?
So from a department perspective or a hiring manager perspective, I would want to see if I only have one vacancy, I want to see everyone that applies to use my matrix to narrow down who I want to invite to an interview, right? What if that last day the job was posting, the most qualified candidate is applying at that time, right? We do have some postings that we choose to say, will be first reviewed on this date, and then it closes this date. And on those postings, we can review, at that date. So it's really just what we advertise and how we advertise it.
So, like, theoretically, I understand what you're saying. Like, that is, in a perfect world, giving us the best, we're seeing all the options on the table and da-da-da-da. But, like, other than in a bureaucracy like this one, most jobs, do not have long processes like these. You post a job, day one, you may get someone amazing. Day 7, you may get someone amazing who's perfectly fit for the job, and you've already started interviewing people. Like, I guess what I'm trying to understand is there some sort of code somewhere written that, like, forces us to operate this way, or can we modernize and operate in a more 2023 kind of way?
We can certainly explore other options to get down to there. What you'll see towards the end of this presentation is with our recommendations, this timeline dramatically being reduced to an industry standard timeline of around 45 days.
Okay, yeah, I'll wait through it, but I just think, like, there's rarely any jobs, even at, like, the best possible places one could want to get a job now, where you have these, like, very strict windows. It's more just, you post the job. Yes, you can keep it open till a certain point, but that doesn't mean, you can't start doing the interviews or reviewing the applications and whatnot. And I understand, like, the perceived benefits that you're saying we get from that, but I wonder with the extended timeline how many people we ultimately completely lose because of it as well. So just my thoughts there. Thank you.
So with those changes we made, we do still have some additional challenges. The first one we'll mention is a culture shift. As I mentioned, our employees are accustomed to this eligible list model where I apply for a job and that I live on that list for 6 to 12 months. I may get called to interview for whatever opening in whatever department that is in that same classification. So that's one item. We also have our current salary review process, which contributes to that 25-day between final interview and accepted job offer. And then we have our background check that contributes to that, as well as some CDL requirements, and then ultimately the hiring manager requirements. So that shift from the eligible list to the process base, which dramatically reduced the timeline, creates a larger burden on the hiring manager to choose their panel, schedule their interviews, all of that before we'll post the job. It really helps with the candidate experience because now I get notified and all of that, but it did put burden on the hiring managers. So as we go through this, we have a recommendation that will help with that as well. In addition to these challenges, I also want to show one of our biggest challenges we have. The graph you see on the screen there shows the number of new hires, that's the blue graph, compared to individuals separating from the city through retirement or other reasons, that's the red bar on the graph. So as you can see, we've made improvements in hiring, the number of individuals we're bringing into the city month over month. However, we're still struggling to keep up with those individuals who are separating from the city, again, through retirement or other reasons. So that is one challenge that we are looking for. That's a retention piece.
Dave, question here.
Do you have like a percentage of how many were retirements versus how many were people just leaving the job or they were fired?
Madam Chair, members of the subcommittee, I don't have those exact numbers. I'll certainly provide them to you. A lot of those are retirements. Our workforce is coming retirement eligible and choosing to leave through the retirement methods, but I can get you those exact percentages.
Yeah, I'm just curious. I thought a lot might be retirements just given the baby boomer age, and they're all retiring. So. Okay, thank you.
So with these challenges that I just mentioned on the previous couple slides, we are working on some additional changes that help with the recruiting efforts. So we're currently revising our background process. What I mean by that is we're revising the AR that limits who is required to go through background and what level of background they're required to go through, as well as having the ability for departments to start individuals pending a background for certain positions. There's some positions we can't do that with, but there's several we can, just our current AR doesn't allow for that. So we're at the final stages of revising that AR to allow some flexibility in the background check. We're also revising the CDL medical card requirements. So currently the AR requires individuals hired into a CDL position to see our contracted provider to get a medical card. We are changing that to where they can provide their own medical card, because if they have a CDL, chances are they already have an active medical card, so we're just going to accept that medical card. The CDL physical is a standard physical that you have to be licensed to give, so whether that card comes from our contracted provider or their own provider, the requirements are the same. That'll speed up and require one less visit for someone being hired in a CDL position. We're also streamlining that salary approval process that I mentioned contributes to that 25 days, lessening the amount of approvals it takes to hire someone above a certain step. And then, as we've mentioned at previous meetings, we've done the hiring, retention, and referral incentives to help not only on the retention side, but also on attracting candidates here, as well as the $3 an hour CDL incentive. And the one I want to dive a little deeper into is this dedicated recruiter model. This is something that we recently implemented and is showing very positive results on the recruiting timeline and number of individuals. So the dedicated recruiting model is something we implemented in fall of 2021, and we've implemented this in some of the large enterprise departments. They work in partnership with our talent acquisition team in HR, and their major functions include helping with that administrative support pieces. So as I mentioned, the process-based recruitment process has put a little bit more burden on the hiring manager. These dedicated recruiters can help lessen that burden. So they can help with job postings, selection process, contacting candidates, attending hiring events, kind of those items. So what it looks like right now is aviation has one dedicated recruiter position, IT has one, police has two, public works has one, water services has two, and then we have some additional administrative support for these positions in those departments as well. So with this dedicated recruiter model, with the police department, we have nearly doubled the number of 911 operator positions we've hired for using this dedicated recruiter in the police department. For the water services department, we've seen a 44% decrease in the time to fill vacant positions. So that's that timeline of the entire process, because they're helping with those administrative pieces, greatly reduces the timeline. In public works, we've seen the SWEO vacancy rates drop from around 24% to just over 11% since September 1st of 2022. And using this model in the aviation department, we've seen vacancy rates decrease from 21% to 14%. Again, these are all tied to that dedicated recruiter model. As requested at the last subcommittee, we've also explored the option of contracting out recruitments, and we've looked at multiple options that I'll go over. The first option we explored is looking at a recruiting agency, essentially hire an agency to do as much of the process as they can for us. As you can see, there are several steps that an agency could help with. However, this doesn't eliminate that administrative burden on duties that a hiring manager needs to do, like reviewing the job posting to make sure it's accurate, or conducting interviews. You know, we want city staff, city panels to conduct the interviews, or even writing the questions. So a hiring manager may want to ask a specific question during those interviews, so they review the hiring questions and stuff. So while they could do some pieces, it doesn't necessarily lessen the burden, because most of those, the dark green you see there that they're doing is what our talent acquisition team is doing now. The other pieces of this, it would also take an RFP process, which could be up to 12-month process to implement a recruiting agency to take over this process. And as well as we have concerns with the agency maintaining recruitment data, adhering and monitoring our personnel rules, as well as fulfilling public records requests. So that's just some drawbacks. However, as we're exploring this contracting services, we do have a second option that would use either temporary staff or contracting staff to really support using the administrative tasks for the hiring managers. So they could facilitate scheduling the phone calls to the candidates. They can upload the documentation into our system. They can help screen candidates, prepare interview binders, schedule those interviews, help get on the panel schedule. They can do that administrative burden that's now on the hiring manager. Having temp or contractor staff take over those pieces would dramatically help speed up the timeline that we'll see here in a minute. And this option would ultimately allow for flexibility using these contractors or temp staff for other administrative roles connected or not connected to the recruiting process to help speed it up. So in addition to what we're already working on, those AR changes I mentioned, we are recommending the second contracting model, if you will, which would be adding dedicated hiring process admin support staff. And we could do this two different ways. We could go temp staff through a temporary agency, a contract service, or adding city personnel to assist with that administrative function. Either way would accomplish that. We are recommending to revise the personnel rules to be focused on that position process-based recruitment only. Again, our employees are accustomed to the eligible list that lives for 6 to 12 months, but the candidate experience from the outside, that creates that no communication piece. So with that change in the personnel rules to that model only, we would really want to communicate that change to all staff, and that can be through webinars, through training, through required training to see how the process works now. Because again, everyone's accustomed to how it used to work, and that's a pretty big culture shift on that. And then we also would like to implement an automatic job notification. So this is something that applicants would opt into when they apply for a job, which would send them the most up-to-date listings of all openings. So it's a weekly listing we send out. They could opt in right when they apply the first time. So if they're not successful with their first application, they'll be notified of all future job openings so that they can reapply. And it also would automate the response when a selection is made. So currently under that process-based recruitment, I mentioned once a selection is made, everybody is contacted that was on that list. This would automate that system as well, to where once the selection is made in the system, an automatic email goes out to everybody versus a manual email like we're doing now. With these recommendations and what we're currently working on, we believe that we can get the recruitment timeline to what would be within industry standards. So same steps here in this process. However, with these implementations and the additional admin support to help the hiring managers, we believe we can get the total timeline from supervisor request to fill a position to someone starting in that position between 45 and 54 days. And more importantly, that candidate experience from the time the job closes to the time I'm told if I was successful or not, we can get that between 15 and 27 days. With that, I would be happy to answer any questions.
That's a great presentation, Dave. Thank you. Questions, comments? Councilwoman Stark.
Just a couple questions. So I think equally important is retention. And so I know you're looking at a comp and classification study, which I think will also incentivize people to stay with the city, correct? And just, do we still have the rule of 80 for new hires? No, I should know this, but.
The rule of 80 for retirement?
Yeah.
It is not. So that was tier 1, tier 2, and now we're in tier 3 retirement.
So then people will be also staying longer. So are we looking at additional steps to keep people incentivized?
Yeah. So, Madam Chair, members of the subcommittee, so through the class and comp study, we are exploring all those pieces, the number of steps, the top range of the steps, looking at those comparators. That's what our consultant is doing with results for that expected in the springtime, which we'll go over in more depth on that. But to answer your first part, retention is a big piece of this. That's why I wanted to show that graph that showed even though we're increasing hiring, and we are increasing hiring, we're still struggling to keep up with the separations. So that's why we've done the retention incentives and the CDL pay. So we are addressing retention while we're waiting for the class and comp study as well.
Well, I do think it's important that we complement what you're proposing with the classification and comp study. Obviously, I think our city employees deserve a much-needed raise, and I think that provides that incentive for people to stay. One last question. So as far as recruitment, have we looked at retirees and helping assist us with the interview process? I mean, we have quite a few people. For example, here, Tony Macaron, PIO. She originally started out as a PIO. Could we bring people like that back to help? Because I think part of the problem is then you take people from the field or from their other jobs because they have to spend a day or two interviewing. It is grueling being on the interviewing process. So have you also looked at that, or are departments already doing that?
Yeah. Madam Chair, members of the subcommittee, so departments can choose panel members that are not city employees. I believe that's what you're alluding to is the interview process. I think we could probably do a better job of utilizing retirees or individuals outside the city to sit on retired panels, so that is absolutely something we can explore, because as you mentioned, if you get asked to sit on an interview panel, that is most likely a half day or a full day, which takes time to schedule.
Half day, I don't believe. I'm going to say it's more a full day to 2 days when you go through an interview process. But I certainly think that might be something we should look at. So thank you, and thank you, Madam Chair.
Councilwoman, I'm sorry.
Thank you, and definitely agree with all of the points around retention made by Councilwoman Stark. I really like the dedicated recruiter model and the stats that you showed about how it's made a difference there. Is that part of the recommendations as well, to increase the number of dedicated recruiters and especially focusing on the departments that have the most vacancies?
Yes, Madam Chair, members of the committee, that's where that admin support would be focused. They would be dedicated to each department, kind of expanding that dedicated recruiting model.
Okay. And then do you mind pulling that slide back up of the ideal process-based timeline? I think, first of all, already a huge improvement. I think bringing that candidate experience timeline down to 15 to 27 is good. I still feel very, very strongly that I do not think that 15-day window of a posting is necessary. I know that has typically been the way, large bureaucracies, when I used to work at the United Nations, they also had one like that. But if you look at most jobs today, whether you are applying to work at In-N-Out or whether you are applying to a major nonprofit, whatever it might be, you don't often see those posting periods anymore. People, I feel like, are operating on oh, cool, I just saw this great job opportunity, let me apply right away. I think it should be on a first come, first serve, and I really do think that could make a big difference, because let's say a department, whether it's parks, public works, whoever, is really desperately needing to hire people. The moment that job is posted and resumes start coming in, they should start reviewing those applications, and they should start setting up those interviews. And I think people, especially when you're the person applying for a job, in this day and age, where people are pretty used to quick responses and quick getting a call immediately, not waiting 2 weeks. 2 weeks later, they may have already interviewed for a whole other job and accepted it, to be frank. So if there's no rule that makes us do that, I don't see why that should be there, maybe we leave it as a window of like, this job will be up for 15 days, but like with a disclaimer that says like they will be reviewed on a first come, first serve basis. That's just my thought. I think that would make a big difference, especially if it's not a highly specialized role. You know, I could see how, like, let's say in the heat relief office, there's a highly specialized role. We want to make sure we get the exact right person with the right degree and experiences. But if in a different department, that's not the case, and we really just need quality people, I don't see why it should be there. So that's my only amendment to the recommendations that you've given. If we could test that out, I think it would be helpful. Thank you.
Madam Chair, members of the subcommittee, we will absolutely explore that option and see what is there. It may be a personnel rule or in the charter. Who knows? We'll explore that after this meeting.
Great. Other questions, comments? So I think also for me on this hiring panel, why do we need to have a hiring panel? Why can't we just have the department, let's say for example, they're going to parks. Why can't we just have, you know, a couple people from parks interview people, you know, making sure that we can accelerate that process? Like, I just think that, you know, I mean, there's a lot of departments that are in a lot of need, where we need to hire a lot of people. I think, you know, part of retention is meaning, because I know there's a lot of departments where we've increased the pay, but people are still not staying because we don't have enough workers. So I think that, you know, we're never going to be able to we're always going to be playing catch up if we just cannot accelerate these processes. I do agree 100% with Councilwoman Ansari that we just need to accelerate that process. The hiring panel, I think it's also very intimidating for the person that's getting interviewed, especially when they're, you know, not coming in, to interview, to be the city manager. I get it, right? That when you're functioning for the whole city, like, you want to make sure that different people have their input, but there's a lot of these positions, where I think only people in the department should be doing those interviews. So I would highly recommend that we look at this hiring panel and how we can streamline that just to the department heads in the department, just so that we can make this go faster. As we were looking at what did we say? The personnel, what was it? The folks that were going to be coming in and helping us with this process, I also think that those folks could also be looking at the applications. Maybe that's another one of the criteria. Can you pull that back up, the criteria of, I think it was like the second or third slide.
Madam Chair, is this the slide you wanted to see? Was it the slide with all the...
It was the slide. I think it was where we were looking at not hiring a company, but hiring people that were...
slide 23.
Contracts, yes. The dedicated recruiter model, I think that's what it was, in its functions. That one right there, yes.
Gotcha.
So I think on that list, I think the other thing that they could be doing is looking at all of these resumes that are coming in, and maybe these are folks, maybe this is a place where someone that has worked for the city can come in and review some of these resumes and say, you know what, this person is probably not fit for this department, but maybe they're fit for that department, and we accelerate the process with some of these applications as well. I mean, like I said before, we've seen so many folks that have come and applied jobs at the city and never received a call back just because they applied for the wrong job, but they're actually very qualified to work for the city of Phoenix. So I would really recommend that we add that as another job description, that they help us go through those applications, those resumes, and that they can help us navigate if those folks don't really qualify for a certain department. Maybe maybe they qualify for a different one. Because I do think making sure, I think when we call people back, I know when I was searching for a job, when you get that call back and saying, you know what, you're in line and we're going to call you, then people tend to maybe want to wait a little bit more. So I do think that we need to figure that piece out when the applications are coming in. Because how many open positions do we have?
Madam Chair, I don't have the current vacancy rate off the top of my head. I apologize.
But a lot, right? I know we have a lot. I know we have a lot of open positions, and I see the numbers in terms of the areas where we have been able to hire. But if we look at those positions, those are positions where we gave the raises, right? And I think I'm not surprised that we were actually able to do that. But I think that's important. Like, retention is important, but I think the only way we're going to fix retention is by hiring. So I definitely think we need to look at that. And then the other place where I can see a place of opportunity when it comes to retention and when it comes to hiring is really looking at our part-time positions. I know that we are lacking a lot of PAC workers. I know that when it comes to aquatic staff, I know that we're going to start talking a lot about that as well. And I was just thinking, one of the things that we should look into is seeing folks that have been with the city for over a year, maybe trying to give those folks, benefits. I think that that's another incentive that we should be looking at for our part-timers. If they've been with us for more than a year and they're like some of our superstar PAC workers or superstar people in aquatics, maybe we should be giving more benefits to those people. So I would also ask for us to look at that for our part-timers as well. And finding new ways to incentivize and help our new hires and help fill those part-time positions. I would ask that we begin a policy of offering those benefits, such as health insurance, sick days, and holiday pay to part-time employees that have worked for the city and have proven their dedication to our programs. I get it that we don't offer that to everyone, but I'm sure that there are folks that have been with the city for a long time and don't receive those benefits. But I do appreciate the hard work on this, Dave. I know it's, we put you a little bit under it was a little bit of a crunch to get this done, but I knew you could get it done. And this is great. I just hope you can make those changes. I think we're off to a good start. Can't wait to see the class and comp study and seeing how much better pay we're going to be giving to all of our workers at the City of Phoenix. Any other comments, questions?
Madam Chair, members of the subcommittee, is there a motion that somebody would like to make so we could take it forward to the whole council?
Yes, so I would like to make a motion to move forward with item 10, citywide recruitment and hiring process.
Second.
All those in favor, please say aye.
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 It passes. Thank you so much for that.
Thank you, Madam Chair.
Thank
members
you.
of the committee.
And with that, do we have anyone else registered for public comment? Future agenda items? None? Okay, with that, we are adjourned. Thank you, everyone. Yeah, sorry, go ahead. Yes.
Sorry, I was a little bit slow. Just a quick request for a future meeting. I'd like to request a presentation about our partnership with HomeServe, the National League of Cities Service Line Warranty Program. So I think our constituents would greatly benefit from learning more about this insurance that covers unexpected water leaks not covered by insurance or the city. I think this is especially important for some of our seniors and some of our fixed income folks in some of our older neighborhoods. So just a presentation and more information on HomeServe.
Great, thank you. Okay, thank you, everyone. With that, we are adjourned.
Department heads who, frankly, we wouldn't be here today without their support. Street Transportation Director Kenny Knudsen's with us.